Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol niyeh b'dbarei. Amen. Okay, good morning. Good morning. Chevra, thank you so much for joining. As we jump back into Likutei Moharan, Torah, Chof, Tes, B'siyata D'Shmaya. Today's shiur is sponsored by Jason Kaplan in honor of his parents Martin and Judith Kaplan and his wife's parents Abinoam and Faye Sharabi. Should be a schus for all of them. Also sponsored anonymously b'schus Shidduchim for Klalli Yisrael singles. Should only hear good news. And b'schus Yitzchak Gedalyah ben Ilanit and Ilanit bas Miriam. Also sponsored by R Yaakov Klein, Ilanit his parents, Rivka Bryndel bas Simcha and Ya'akov and yeshayihu. The neshama should have an aliyah in the schus of our learning. This morning should be a schus for all of the names mentioned and all of Klalli Yisrael. Okay, so we continue our learning with Torah Chof Tes. I want to go back just to what we were talking about yesterday, where the Rebbe had told us that when a person has not yet attained the aspect of Pgam HaBris, Klalli, so then dibur is aser, right? Speech is forbidden. And we spoke about that at length yesterday, about the connection between Kudsha B'richu and Shrinte, Kudsha B'richu being the transcendent principle of godliness, which is the source of meaning and the source of everything real that means to be communicated through this worldliness, right? Or any aspect of the phenomena that we encounter in this world, which is the outermost garment, so to speak, of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's creation, Malchus, right? Which is the outer-facing nature of reality that we encounter. And Malchus is supposed to be the speech, right? And that's why throughout the creation narrative, HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world with speech. Vayomer Elikim, Vayomer Elikim, Vayomer Elikim, the whole time. And Elikim is an aspect of Malchus. Even though Elikim is the midah of Gevura, it's true. But the pasuk also says, Velikim Malki Mikedem. Right, so the Sefarim say that the Shem Elikim is also associated with Malchus, even though generally speaking, the Shem associated with Malchus is the Shem Aleph Daled Nun Yud. Elikim is also associated with Malchus. Malchus is called Dina de Malchusa Dina. Right, there's an aspect of Din in Malchus as well. And in an ideal world, when a person is able to understand that Elikim is composed of the letters Mi and Eile, coming from the pasuk Yeshayihu that asks each and every one of us, Su'u Marim Einechem, right, to lift our eyes Marim on high, that on one level literally means to look up at the sky, which I mentioned also yesterday, but obviously he's speaking on a deeper level, Su'u Marim Einechem, not simply to look up at the sky, but that a person's eyesight should be elevated, Su'u Marim Einechem, that a person should look at the world through elevated eyes, U'ru'u Mi Bara Eile, and come to see me, which is the single unifying source, find that principle of essence within mi bara eila, within the many-ness, within the varied multiplicity, the nature of duality in which we live. The Zohar Kodesh tells us all the time that if a person takes the letters mi and puts them together with eila, you have the word Elokim. Right? Elokim is mi and eila. Right? So Elikim recognizes that there's a world of many-ness. Elikim recognizes that there's a world of distinction and multiplicity. There's a world that seems to be separate from Elokus. That's Elikim. That is the Shem Elikim. That's Malchus. That's our world that we encounter and live within. However, a higher perspective understands that you can find the presence of the Creator dafka in the Eila. That's the only way that we can experience godliness as limited human beings who need to have our own identity in order to exist, right? Otherwise, we would never know. We would just be subsumed within godliness, conscious of Him or not conscious of Him. We would be Him. Right? The only mitzias in which you can have a reality where there are separate individuals, right, separate entities that are recognizing Hashem is only in this world. That's going back to Torah Aleph, what we had learned about the necessity to be able to access the light of the sun is for it to be reflected in the moon. Right? It needs to be channeled through this aspect of communicative creation, right? The creation that was created with the speech of the divine. It's supposed to communicate Hashem's presence, daika, in this realm, mi bara eila, that's Elikim, as opposed to its gematria, hateva, which is just nature. But when a person is living in a world of Pgam HaBris, where a person is living in a world of where a person doesn't feel the constant guidance of a system of limitation that comes from a higher place, and a person is bottled to that, When a person doesn't feel that, and a person is in a state of hefkerus or pritzus, that's really what it means. It's pirates geder, right? Why do we use that word pirates geder, dafka, in the context of our rayas? Because that's exactly what Shmiras HaBris is. It's shakai, which means stay enclosed, stay within what is mutter, right? In the most literal sense. Shakai, misha amar la'olamai dai, or alternatively, this is something also we've learned in the past, sheyesh dai be'elikusi lekula beria. That's the other reading of shakai. It's not just sheyesh sha'amar la'olamai dai, which is the aspect of boundaries and limitations, principles, control, self-control, but it's also the aspect of sheyesh dai be'elikusi lekula beria, right? Where if you remain within what's mutter, yesh dai be'elikusi, you're gonna end up having a sweeter life. Whatever you're looking for outside, you'll actually find inside if you can give it enough time for it to settle and to become part of the way that you act. You're going to taste the sweetness, the bitterness of the nachash, like we speak about the afar that the nachash tastes everywhere he goes, is a result of him going everywhere. That's why the nachash tastes dust everywhere he goes, because that's what happens when you go everywhere. Everything becomes bitter, everything becomes hateful, everything becomes depressive, everything becomes fatalistic, everything becomes saturated with a spirit of despair. And so sheyesh dai b'likusa lekula beria means you'll have enough if you stay within what HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives you. This is the consciousness. Going back, I'm just tying up a bunch of things together, of masa umatan be'emuna. Right? That's the aspect. We were talking about this yesterday. Parnasa benakel being a reflection of a person's consciousness of ezu ashir hasameach bechelko. Those two words, sameach bechelko, are the two definitions of shakai. Right? Chelko is sheyesh sha'imar la'olamai dai. Every person has their own chelik. Sameach bechelko is the aspect of sheyesh dai be'elikusi lekula beria, where HaKadosh Baruch Hu promises that no matter what your situation is, if you stay within that for now, and a person can manage to develop the proper perspectives that will enable them to do this in a healthy way, you'll have the happiness that you're looking for. You'll have the menucha that you're looking for. As counterintuitive and paradoxical as that might seem, like Daika, when I restrict myself, right, somehow that's where happiness is. And the answer is yes, that's exactly where happiness is. And the more that a person goes and is mafkir themselves, pleasure perhaps, but sorrow and bitterness down the road, right? And that's just the way it is. That's life, right? That's the bite of the nachash. That's the whole seduction of this primordial force that manifests in the Satan, who Yetzahara, Rabbi Nachman renamed it the Kehal Yedidim, whatever it is, but it's a dimion. That's the point, right? It is a dimion. And ultimately, when a person is living in a state of Pgam HaBris, so then everything you eat turns to dust, right? Which means everything that we encounter is opaque, is clouded. There's no tam in life. There's no tam, right? There's no sense of meaning. There's no sense of value. Everything just becomes arbitrary. Talk about keri, right? Mikre. That's what it means. And that's the aspect of Zantad of Amalek. That's the Indian of Asher Kar Chabad. Right? A person is struck with the curse of the bitterness of Mikre, where a person lives in a world where the Eila does not communicate the me. And that's Ne'elamti Dumia, right? That's Malchus falls silent. Malchus stops communicating what it ought to communicate. We stop being able to perceive and sense the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu on a day-to-day level through every single aspect of reality. A person just falls into the mindset and consciousness of a natural world disconnected from any transcendent source. And so that, in a certain sense, is also a one of the meanings here, that dibur becomes asur. The word asur means forbidden, but as the Baal Tanya explains, the word asur also means tied up, bound, right? That's what asur means. According to the Baal Tanya, anything that's asur in Torah, we've also mentioned this in the past, is bound up to the realm of the shalish klipas atmeis legamri, right? Of the three fundamentally unelevatable forces, which we had a lot of Torahs about, or one Torah in particular that really went into that inyan. And that's it. It's asur, it's tied down. And so dibur asur means the communicative capacity of the world to enable those living in it to perceive a message from the divine, dibur becomes aser. It's tied down. It is locked up. Gan na'ul, right? It's also a reference to, right? The guard gan is malchus, is na'ul. It gets locked. It gets locked up. But the way that we understood it on a more personal level, which I've been thinking about a lot, and I think it's a really good approach, I think, is that we need to withhold ourselves from making any kind of declaration when a person's in this state. Dibur becomes aser. To say anything definitive, ani amarti bechavzi, right? David Amalek says, kala adam kaisev, that kind of thing, right? Chavzi means, that's not what David Amalek, that's not the truth. Or kol ha'adam kaisev, like every single individual is fill in the blank. That's not true. But when a person's in a state of the consciousness of the Nachash and the consciousness of Amalek, then yeah, you can end up making generalized declarations on all of humanity, and that are ultimately fatalistic.
Klalli.
Right? That are right. Beautiful. Is that, I don't know what you meant, but is that tikkun Klalli?
You're doing the opposite.
Yes, Gevalti. Oh, beautiful.
Yes.
That's a good Torah. Tikkun Klalli. Right. Because when a person's in Pgam HaBris, then their generalizations, the Klalli is nifkam. It's blemished. It's blemished because that's what Amalek wants. It wants us to give up, and all the while that you can find the Nekuda Tova, you shouldn't give up, because then there's still hope, right? But the Pgam Tikkun Klalli is the Pgam Klalli. Unbelievable, Aiden, mamish. That's probably one of the best Torahs that I've heard from the Chevra since we started. Actually, that's a good Torah. Tikkun Klalli, that's unbelievable, because it's coming to rectify Pgam Klalli. When a person makes a Pgam Klalli, because they're not able to find any prat that's tov. That's called the Nekuda Tova. When a person is connected to a tzaddik, Rebbe Shimon level, right, where when he was alive, his energy was poil in the world, they said you can speak psach picha, we learned yesterday. When Rebbe Shimon was nostalgic, so that goes away. The tzaddik is the one who gives us this ability, this consciousness to be able to see the truth. So yeah, Rabbi Nachman's going to say in Shem Yishbailim Klal, because he's coming to counteract the darkness of the Amalekian veil that prevents us from seeing that there is hope. Sure, Rabbi Nachman's going to be the one to teach us about the Nekuda Tova, because without that, we're stuck in Pgam Klalli. And he gives us the tikkun HaKlalli. And he says, relax. All hope is not lost. All hope is not lost. I think if you can sort of sum up what our generation is struggling with, we're grappling with despair. Especially the Jews in New York. We're right now. We're grappling with because that's how it could feel like the world is closing in on us. Like, what are we going to do? I think I saw that on there's this comedy show in Eretz Yisrael called Eretz Nederet. Right, it's a very funny thing. Then they do all these little skits. So apparently they released a thing. I didn't see it. I just saw someone write something about it. They released a skit with two people who meet each other in Ben Gurion Airport. And one of them is from New York making aliyah because he's looking to come home, and be safe and accepted. And the other one is making yeridah from Eretz Yisrael to New York because he just wants to live a normal life without wars and and they can't understand each other. And then they both walk away, and as they walk away, each one mutters, "What a moron!" Right? Like we feel stuck. Our experience is Pgam Klalli. Where should we go exactly? We should go to New York. You should go to Eretz Yisrael. Like what? Well, yes, you should go to Eretz Yisrael, but there's a certain, that's the Pgam. That's the Indian of the Meraglim. That's the Indian of the Meraglim. Was it really true that the whole Eretz, the land swallows its inhabitants? Is that really true? I mean, first of all, the only reason they said that is because all the giants were all the people were dying that day because HaKadosh Baruch Hu made them die so that they would be busy burying them and they could go ahead and check out the land. Like, not only isn't it true, it in as much as it's true, it's for your benefit. Like, what are you talking about? Eretz Yoshva. But this is the aspect of Hoylech Rachel Megalaside. It's Rechilas. That's what that means. And that ties back into what we said yesterday. I'm just reiterating, right? Because these are deep things and need a little bit more time sometimes. What we said yesterday about the eating of Lashon Hara. That's Lashon Hara. It's all speech. Because it's a Pgam of Malchus, right? In other words, this that a person finds something negative to talk about is not just that, they're talking about the negative thing they found. This that they found something negative is already a Pgam of Lashon. Because everything that you're looking at is already Lashon. The question is it Lashon Tov, and that's subjective to you, or is it Lashon Hara? What is it communicating? Because you'll just continue that chain of communication, because guess what? You're a part of the communication. You're a part of this world, which is all the communication of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So it doesn't begin with what you say, it begins with what you see. See something, say something, right? The saying is a direct channel, or conduit, I should say, to the seeing. It begins with our einayim. Shmiras einayim. So Shmiras einayim doesn't just mean not looking where a person shouldn't look. It means it's much bigger than that. In the same way that Pgam HaBris, the way that we're learning it, is much more than simply this particular area. It is a lifestyle. You understand? It's a consciousness. That the actual struggle of Pgam HaBris is a symptom or an indicator as to where a person is more generally. But it begins up here. You understand? It begins up here. That's Shmiras Einayim. We protect the way that we look at the world. What do we see when we look at the world? And this, again, admittedly, this is a hard, difficult, challenging struggle that, especially in the world that we live in. There is so much negativity today. And it's easy to fall into it. I fall into it all the time. I'm telling you, it's really, really difficult. Extremely, extremely difficult. The news is not going to tell you anything good. It just won't. Not because there aren't good things happening. There are billions of good things happening every second. There are billions of people in this world. It's a pellet, right? When you look at a day's news cycle, it's like, what are the two things that happen that are in the news? Mamdani 1 in New York, and there was a terrible crash of a UPS truck, in Arizona, somewhere in Arizona, right? Horrible tragedy. Arguably, horrible tragedies. Depends on what your perspective is, right? Okay. There are 8 billion people in the world, right? Those are the two things that happen. It's wild if you think of it. There should be catastrophes left, right, and center, and everything should be going wrong all the time. For the overwhelming majority of people, things are good. There's a lot of love in this world. There really is. There's a lot of goodness in this world. Even as I'm saying this, I have to convince myself, and I'm checking in with myself. Is this MS? Really? And yes, it is, you idiot. I'm talking to myself. Yeah, yes, of course it's MS. And it's what do you mean it's MS? But look at all the data. What data? The data that they're showing you is not data. It's collected just to speak to that base lower part of you, which is more likely to buy stuff. Honestly, it's because the part of us that's looking for the goodness doesn't need to buy anything. When you talk about consumerism, it's just okay. It realizes everything's already fine. You're already fine. Everything's already okay. And that is MS. Now, it's also MS that there's a lot of other stuff going on. Naniach. But I don't believe that we're going to be able to solve any of it if we're not anchored in that higher place. If you're stuck in it, you're like the Baal Tanya also says, right? If you're fighting with someone dirty, you're going to get dirty, because that's what it is. You have to soar above. We have to find a way to fix Pgam HaBris. But Pgam HaBris, again, isn't this Nekuda of Bris. That's an indicator, or that's an outgrowth. Pgam HaBris is the way that we look at the world. Do I still have a covenant with God? Right? Bris. Does the world still have a covenant with God? Meaning, is there still an open channel between the source of good and this world that He created? Can I be shomer einayim, not to look at the negative, right, but to try to see the positive? Can I stay away from Lashon Hara, right? And try to sing the song, which is the tikkun for Lashon Hara in Torah Gimel, right? Which is song of the Nekudas Tovos that I'm able to find everywhere. And in so doing, can I be metakin the Pgam Klalli with tikkun HaKlalli? so that I make sure that I don't make blanket generalizations about everyone and anything. And I'm able to realize, like, all humans are complicated. Every human has something good. This is called, you understand, this is called Tikkun HaKlalli. I think very few people learn Likutei Moharan this way, because otherwise you just read it on the surface. But it's so deep. Like I posted on my status yesterday, Rebbe Nachman said, "But Torah sheli yesh amkus gadol." There's tremendous depth, and you have to mine it. You have to really mine it and like harav over it, and then, oh my gosh, all these doorways start opening up, new worlds, new realms. Ashreinu, mamish ashreinu. So all the while that a person is stuck in that consciousness, so then dibur is aser. Meaning a person needs to remind themselves, be careful what you say about reality when you're stuck in a tunnel vision state of mind. Be careful. Right? It's just like a person when they're angry. They have to be careful what they say to someone, because they don't want to say something they don't mean. Right? That's Pgam HaBris. Saying something, there's a higher part of you that didn't really mean that. Then you're going to have to apologize, you're going to have to explain yourself, It's the same thing. Dibur is aser. In a bad mood, person's feeling down, person's feeling broken, dejected. Okay, feel that. Don't say anything. Don't make any, they say, don't make any decisions from that place. Don't make it, because that's not the MS. It's not MS. That's a momentary slip into the mind, into the worldview of Amalek, into the worldview of the Nachash, that isn't seeing reality for reality. And that's Ani Amarti V'chavzi Kol Adam Koizev. That's Pgam. That's Pgam HaKlalli. We have to rectify that. Okay? How do we rectify that? Tikkun HaBris. Tikkun HaBris is Tikkun HaMalchus. Tikkun HaMalchus, Tikkun Begadim, Tikkun Lashon. And then you have a situation where Lemani Zamnercha Chavoid, so that Kavod, which is Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuscha, so Malchus is connected to Kavod, and Yizamercha Kavod. It's the music, the wonderful music of the holy musicians that we learned about in Torah Gimel, that are coming to rectify and to counteract the two impure birds that are related to the aspect of the Mitzvah, the aspect of Rachel, which is the aspect of the Meraglim, who don't see anything good and only see everything bad, which locks them out of Eretz Yisrael, because what's Eretz? Eretz is Malchus. Eretz Yisrael is a Malchus that's saturated with Klal Yisrael's energy. And so it's not, you say Lashon Hara about Eretz Yisrael, so you can't get in. No. It's a direct parallel. It's oppositional to Eretz Yisrael, because Lashon is Eretz. Eretz is Lashon, because they're both Malchus. If you speak Lashon Hara, so you don't have a kesher with Eretz Yisrael, because Eretz Yisrael is the opposite of Lashon Hara. You wanted to say something?
Shimon says about the word Lashon, he expresses often, it's from the Lashon, it's from Lash, from the Melokas, Lash, to need. So I'm often thinking Lashon Hara is when you mull over negativity, you lash on, on the Ra, on what is Ra,
that's right.
Than on
That's right.
reality.
That's right, beautiful. Shkoyach. That's right. That's right. Remember, there's the Bris HaMa'or, right? There's the covenant of the skin. This is from Sefer Yetzirah, and there's also a Bris HaLashon. The tongue is in the face what the bris is on the body. Right? These two things parallel one another, because all of the spheres are wrapped up into the head. The two lips are Netzach and Hod, and the tongue that emerges from within them is Yisod. Right? So Al-Pi-Pnimius, the tongue literally is a bris. And then we have the bris on the body. Right? So these two things are mamish connected. And one influences the other. Pgam HaBris, you're going to, a person, I'll give you another thing. Why is there such a thing called nivel peh? Why is there such a thing called nivel peh? where the words, generally, that are associated with nivel peh are all words that refer to sexuality. That is a pellet. They couldn't come up with any other words that refer to any other ugly thing in this world or anything. Like, why are all of these words, right? Not that we should contemplate this now, but all of these words, they're all related to to this area of life. Like, what a pellet. Because again, the Lashon is the Bris. The Bris is the Lashon. And so, Pgam HaBris will cause nivel peh. But it goes the opposite way too. Nivel peh, and I'm not speaking just about like using curse words, right? Nivel peh meaning the nivel, the degradation of the way that we speak and the content of the words that we communicate to the people to whom we communicate them. That quality or lack thereof is going to have an impact on the Bris. Because it's a worldview. When a person lives in a worldview, in a mindset of waste, because they look at the world and say, I don't know what we're doing here. They're living in mikra. So then, why shouldn't I waste the life essence that's inside of me? Everything's purposeless. There's no shakai. There's no elokus. And there's no misha amar lo elamai dai. The me of mi bara eila is gone. There's no me in the eila. There's just Eila. So Eila means I don't have to stay limited. I can do whatever I want. I can waste whatever I want because there's no waste. Waste is only waste if there's some kind of objective, sort of framework that says, well, that is going to be wasteful but if the whole thing is wasteful, so then the whole thing is wasteful. I'm just contributing to what already exists. That's called mikra, carry. That's the aspect of Pgam HaBris, nivel peh, that leads to Pgam HaLashon. And that's the consciousness of Lashon Hara. That's why Lashon Hara, it's like it's a huge deal, not simply because of the Aveira of speaking slander, but because of the midos behind it. And this, by the way, I'll just tell you, is a huge klal generally in Yiddishkeit. Usually, much more important than the thing that a person does or doesn't do, what are the midos behind it, right? What is the consciousness that these things reflect? That's what needs to be worked on. It usually goes back to midos, to what a person's general like lenses of reality are, and what a person's frameworks are. Because how we think is how we feel, is how we act. And so the tikkun is not always in how we act. That's a symptom. The tikkun is how do we feel, and how do we feel how we feel, how we think. And so going back to the root is the ikr. I was speaking to somebody yesterday, and she heard a shmooze from my Rebbe, of Moshe Weinberger, our Rebbe, and she was so, he was just basically, he actually asked that it shouldn't be recorded. He was asked if I could listen to it, and she said that it was to a private group, and he didn't want it to be recorded at all. And he basically was talking about the state of education and what our generation needs, and our inability to give the younger generation what they're actually looking for. And his just watching the next generation slip away, in one way or another. And she was so fired up about this, and she was saying, our kids, bottom line, they need love, they need love, they need love. Which is true. They do need love. But love is not all they need. Because if a kid only gets love and doesn't get any sense of identity or responsibility or self-worth that isn't just in the air because, you're so great, but no, here's what you're great at and here's what you're going to contribute. That's just the opposite extreme, and those kids will end up in therapy too. That's not the tikkun for one extreme is not to go to the other extreme. People make this mistake all the time. Because the problem, I mentioned this in the past, the problem wasn't the problem. The problem was the extreme. Because balance is the healing of everything. And I was explaining to her that although in the short term it might look like we just need to sit down all the teachers and say, love your kids, and tell them they're great, and stop being so, focused on marks on tests and attributing value to kids based on their scholastic, achievements or lack thereof. Beautiful. But that's the short road that's really a long road, right? Also to use Tanya terminology, right? That's the derech ktsara shi'arucha. But there's a derech arucha shi'ktsara, which is elevating the hashkafic consciousness of the entire community, right? To focus on, like, why are teachers acting the way that they act? It emerges from principles, like, that ultimately goes back to Torah Chav Ches. Do we see the world as Aleph, 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 Aleph? Meaning, what is our level of Emunah? Because it all goes back to that. It all goes back to that. If I believe that Elokus is only genuinely present as an abstracted principle somewhere up there, everything down here becomes subject to analysis. Is this person good or bad? It's an extremely black or white way of looking at the world, reflected in the way that we dress, by the way. Black and white. Right? I say we, I mean me, and some of us, right? It is a mindset that's reflected in the way that we dress. Everything, there's very little room for nuance. It's black or white. It's chitzoni. Because it doesn't focus on the gradations and the complexities and the nuances and the fundamental essence of holiness and goodness that's already there, so that people, and especially children, don't need to change, they just or transform, and kids don't have potential, they already are, because there's godliness inside of them. They just need to reveal what they already are. Like this whole approach, but it begins with the ways that we think. Just giving love and being more loving educators is not the lo inyan. That we need a hashkafic revolution. Like we need to upgrade our perspectives. Like we need a system update. Apropos to where we are at this current moment in history, to respond to the call of the hour, which is, I've said this in the past, I'll say it again, identity. People don't know who they are. People don't know what it means to be a Jew. People don't know what it means to be a human. People don't know what it means to be. And in my mind, I could be wrong, but in my mind and experience, more important than helping people fix up their actions, more important than helping people fix up their feelings, is helping people fix up the Sader et HaRosh. Because from there, the feelings will emerge and the actions will emerge. Now it's a derech arucha. It's much longer because you have to sit with a person, actually challenge their beliefs and help them to go back to their core principles and definitions and really analyze, like, what do I believe and why? It's hard work. That's not, but that is where change is going to come from. That, in my opinion, that is where change is going to come from. And it's happening. And Baruch Hashem, we're a part of it. And Ashreinu, that we get to be a part of that. But that's where it begins. It's not Pgam HaBris, it's Pgam HaBris. It's up here. It's in my way of thinking. And then comes Likutei Moharan and comes Rabbi Nachman Chaim Moran, and he says, my sefer gives a person a moyach gadol. We learned this on day one, right? The sefer gives a person a moyach gadol, which in Kabbalistic terminology is generally referred to as moichin de gadlus. It gives a person a broad perspective, the biggest, broadest perspective. Because otherwise we're in Moichin de Katnus. Moichin de Katnus is the tunnel vision of Pgam Klalli, where I'm focused on this and I miss the whole picture. And the whole point of the sefer is to almost like compel us, is to force us. But it has to be, I think the way that we're doing it is mamish the way that you have to do it. Every day. This is not a sefer to pull out on Shabbos once a week. It's not going to work. This is a daily, maybe even multiple times. Some of the Chavra are doing this multiple times a day, because it's almost like, how can you live without bookending the rest of your chaotic life with a little bit of Seder, with a little bit of like, you plug back in to the outlet that gives you all of your koyach, all of your strength, plugs you back into the consciousness of a tzaddik, the consciousness of a person who lived Ein Shem Yishbailam Klal, who saw the world through the prism and through the lens of Nekudas Toivos, who was living with Tikkun HaKlali in the deepest sense. You get out of Moichin de Katnus, it gives you Moichin de Gadlus. And that's a big gift. It's a huge matana, and we should feel, if we've benefited from it, we should feel like we want to bring this to as many people as possible. We should feel the pain of the people who are suffering as a result of the system, quote unquote, not being here, and we should feel compassion, and we should really, each of us in our own way, should find our way, like I always mention, to spread this to the best of their capacity. Okay, all of that is a very, very lengthy introduction. or a review to Isaiah, but I think it's important to gloss over some things that I just wanted to make a bit clearer. Okay, take a look at Isaiah now. Let's go a little bit weiter with the time that we have. This is the aspect of the illness that's called neifel in Hebrew, which they translate as epilepsy, but it's not mamish, how epilepsy works. Maybe this is how medicine thought that epilepsy worked then. Maybe this is the spiritual principle behind epilepsy. I don't know. Maybe it's referring to a different illness. But the epileptic who has these seizures, says Rabbi Nachman, Hainu, this is because when the blood is roiling in the body, and they shoot up to the brain, and there's an influx, there's an overwhelm of blood that goes up to the brain. So the moichin get pressured, whether physically or chemically. And this causes epileptic seizures. Now, modern science does not hold this way at all, right? This is not what from our current understanding. But again, first of all, it might have been medically true then, right? And so there was a truth that he was speaking from, but it could still be spiritually true because he's not necessarily speaking about the physical phenomena. There is a spiritual phenomenon, and he explains because the moyach is the commander of the army. And this goes back to what we just said, right? It all is tali on the commander. It's all tali, like the Tanya says again, right? Moyach shalit alalev. The brain is going to be the element which is going to empower and support healthy or unhealthy feeling. Ukishasayne baal asar tzava, as R Yaakov called tzavav. When the commander gets attacked, which I guess is what Israel's been trying to do, right? Which is to take out the chains of command and take out, the echelons. Unfortunately, they seem to have the next echelon already prepared because that's how they structure their society. They expect to die, which makes them a very difficult enemy to fight. But when you, in a normal situation, take out the command, as R Yaakov called tzvav, so then everything's in disarray. Kikulam tuliyim bai. So again, over here, he's not necessarily speaking about epilepsy per se, but spiritual epilepsy for sure. Why is it that our emotions are all out of whack, which therefore leads to our actions being all out of whack, which is a seizure, right? Why do we seize? Meaning, why are we not functioning in life? And the answer is because the commander was taken out, meaning it's all tali on the moyach. And then he says that this causes the shechina to fall, which again, he's not speaking with an epileptic doesn't cause the shechina to fall. He's speaking that the spiritual epileptic, as a result of the brain being in a state of krirus and being in a state of moichin dekatnus and being in a state of Pgam Klalli through tunnel vision. I'm so grateful for that Torah that he said. Psh, that is a good Torah. Tikkun Klalli. Unbelievable. Azaya shchina noifeles. Then the shchina is neufel chas v'shalom. B'bechina sukas David hanoifeles. So he's translating it in as much as neufel as epilepsy. So this is the sukas David. This is the epileptic sukkah of David. That's how he's reading it. Sukas David hanoifeles. Not just that it's the fallen sukkah, it's the epileptic sukkah. The whole sukkah is in disarray. But when a person goes ahead and they rectify their generalities, their generalizations, and they begin to look at the world through the eyes of Kehal HaBris, through the eyes where I have a covenant with Hashem no matter what, and the world has a covenant with Hashem no matter what, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is present in this reality, and instead of Lashon Hara, the world is speaking Lashon Toiv. Ki yedaber shalom el amai. When a person really is able to realize Hashem is speaking good things about our generation, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is good, and He's saying good things, and the world is good, and it's heading in a good way, even though we can't see it, and a person's really able to tikkun Klalli. When a person awakens their mind and is then able to draw down whiteness the pristine garments, without there being the clouded nature of the stains that separate between husband and wife, the dam nida lahagidin, and therefore is able to draw down the tikkun HaKlalli of the gid HaKlalli, which is the aspect of the bris, down into all of the pratiistic gidim of the shasa loisases. To draw down the reality of and the consciousness of finding the good bechol ace, even in the negative times. That the gidim, the gidim should be saturated with whiteness. Then a person will be healed from the spiritual epilepsy. Kum besulas Yisrael, right? Then the pasuk says, and the Gemara darshans this in different ways, right? Because you can read it, Nafla, she has fallen, loisaisiv kum, she will no longer rise, besulas Yisrael, right? Which is a reference to Klal Yisrael. But the Gemara says, no, you should not read it that way. You have to put a comma in like he does here. Nafla loisaisiv comma. No, she has fallen, but she will fall no longer. Kum besulas Yisrael, rise, Klal Yisrael. Va'az hadibur muter, and then you can speak. Because then the speech is speech that will be niskabel, because it has tov in it. It is dibor that can endure. It is a dibor of emes, because it isn't ani amarti b'chavzi kol adam kaizev. That's sheker. That's not true, right? There's a fixing of saying, no, there is goodness in the world, and when a person speaks in that way, then it unlocks all of reality, which is communicating Hashem's presence in a state where dibur is mutter, untied, right, and not usher, tied. And all of a sudden you can actually perceive Hashem's presence in the world, which is Hashem's communication through reality, where it's not a bunch of random events, and it isn't all bad news. It's like HaKadosh Baruch Hu running his show. And a person can feel that, a person can sense that, and a person can live with that awareness. Az ha-dibur mutter, then the dibur becomes permitted or untied. Open your mouth. V'zehu, so that's pshat. Go back into the pasuk that we brought earlier. Lo selech rachil ba'amecha. Let there not be a slanderer in your midst. And we spoke about slander, about the Meraglim, about Lashon Hara, about Pgam HaBris HaLashon that leads to Pgam HaBris Ma'ar. And then the pasuk continues. V'lo samoid al dam re'echa. Right there. It's unbelievable, it's uncanny. There's a reference to dam. Because the dam is the shasag loisa says, which is the aspect of a person who is Pgam HaBris, which is directly correlated to Rechilas, to Lashon Hara. And not just with Leisamad al dam, Leisamad al dam, Re'echa. What's Re'echa? Hainu HaMoichin. Re'echa is always a reference. Friends are a reference to the intellectual cognitive capacities of Chachma and Bina, Shem Train Re in the Lo Misparshin, which are referred to in the Zohar Kodesh as two friends who never part. Because Chachma and Bina need to work in symbiosis one with the other. Even physically, in the physical brain, there's a thing called the corpus callosum that is centered right in the middle of the two hemispheres of the brain and allow them to communicate one to the other. Each one controls a different side of the body. Each one controls different functionality. And so literally our physical brain, which is just a physical copy of the spheres, right, literally manifests this truth that Chachma and Bina operate in tandem. This is also referred to in the Sefer Yetzirah as Havin b'Chachma v'Chakam b'Bina. Right? If you're in Chachma, you need Bina there. If you're in Bina, you need Chachma there. These two things are connected. They're called two friends that don't depart. And so Hashem says, Lo selech Rachel, please don't be a slanderer. V'lo samad al dam re'echa, and don't establish yourself on the dam which is a result of re'echa, a bloody brain, a brain that's stained, a brain that's in moichin de katnus, a brain that goes back to goizel aviv imay, where a person steals away the clarity that they deserve, that they really deserve to live with. It's a great gift to live with this consciousness. Not everybody's zocheh to it. Not everybody's zocheh to it ever. Right? Some people are zocheh to it a few moments at a time, a few days in a week, a few weeks in a month, a few months in a year, a few years in a decade, etc. Like different tzaddikim live like this all the time. All the time. Until David HaMelech eventually gets to a point where he says, Nar hayisi gamze kandi, right? V'loy re'isi tzadik nezav, right? V'zari mevakesh lachem. It's like a bizarre thing. Like I've seen, tzaddikim that are nezav, v'zari mevakesh lachem. There was nobody poor in David HaMelech's time. There was. Gesundheit, but David HaMelech says, I don't see it. I don't. He sees it to help, but that's not what he's looking at. That's not. And we're going to learn that later in the Likutei Moharan. Rabbi Nachman has a lashon derech Hashem yizbarach lahabit ala tovo she'osim. It's Hashem's way to look at the good. Va'av shenim sabay mashe eina tov eina mistakel al zeh. That's his lashon. Hashem doesn't look at that. Hashem looks at the good things that we do. Tzaddikim have godly eyes, like we learned. Einei Hashem el tzaddikim. That tzaddikim look at the world through the eyes of godliness, which means that they too. Loyre isi tzaddik nezav. That's just not what they focus on. They find the good. They find the good. So lo samad al dam re'echa hainu amoichin. Train rein la misparshin. Kisheim einam oimdim in his batlim elasas pu'ulasam al yedei tekbaris hadam al lechatzim as amoichin. When a person's mind isn't prevented from operating on account of the dumb, the dumbim, right? This is that interesting? When a person we call a person who's not particularly bright dumb. Is that amazing?
Is there also a thing about the fact that dumb is red, and that's obviously dead, and so from your perspective, it's
absolutely right, because the redness is in contrast to the whiteness of libuna demoichin, right, which is the Pgam, which is the Kehal Yedidim, right, of Zera, God Lavan. We learned that, right, with Aman. Absolutely, right, and Gevura means it shuts God out, right? It's saturated. We learned that Lavan doesn't actually mean white. We learned that it means translucent, transparent. The redness muddies the water, kipshutai, and we cannot see the truth. We cannot see the reality. So a person, his brain isn't functioning. Goizal avivi imai is dumb. Loy samad al dam re'echa. Right? Essentially, it's saying don't be dumb, right? Because re'echa is the chachma bina. So loy samad al dam re'echa, because that's what the dam is. Unbelievable thing. There's so much depth in Lashon, right? It's Lashon Tov. Loy selech rachel, ayideza loy savar al loy selech rachel ki az hadibur mutter, because then the dibur becomes untied. B'bchinas psach picha b'yoyim Rebbe Shimon, but it's all in the days of Rebbe Shimon. But days are chesed, nights are gvura vayashkim Avram b'boiker. Days are connected to Avram, like the Zohar Kodesh says, da boiker to Avram. The morning belongs to Avram Avinu. The morning is chesed. And Rebbe Shimon is that worldview. Rebbe Shimon comes out of the cave the first time, starts destroying the world. Hashem says, no. No, you get right back in there. That's not it. That's not it. Because there's a way of becoming super spiritual that leads to further Pgam HaBris, even though it looks like Kedusha. I want you to hear that very, very carefully. There's a way it's possible for a person to achieve apparently tremendous madrigas of spiritual connection, but if that translates into seeing the negative in other people or the world, that's a Pgam. That's not how the tzaddikim lived. That's the real struggle. That's the real struggle. And I just in my humble, just my journey, that's even more difficult than actual Pgam HaBris. I think that the allure, at least for me, I could be wrong, I struggle with this daily, as you know, the allure toward negativity, for me, is a greater Yetzer Hara, and I have plenty of Yetzer Hara, you understand, than actual Yetzer Hara. It's such an allure, it's so seductive. It is so seductive. And again, especially in the culture that we live in, with the news that we're constantly absorbing, it is mamish, it pulls you down. It pulls you down. And it takes enormous strength not to give in to that. Enormous strength to be able to self limit and to say, Misha Amar Lo Elamai Dai, Yesh Dai Ba Likusi Likulberia, you live in your Dalat Amis. You find the good. You find the good. These are difficult things. But the perspective of a Rebbe Shimon who comes out of the cave the second time, and he sees a Yid running, and he says, Gavald, what a Yid, right? Shamar v'zachar. I'm sure there was millions of things he could have found wrong with that person. But he didn't. He just focused on this. That this Yid had two adasim, one for Shamar, one for Zachar. He said, Kam chaviv in mitzvahs al Yisrael. How precious are mitzvahs on Klalli Yisrael. But I think another way of reading that is, how beautiful is it to do mitzvahs with Jews? Meaning, to do the mitzvah of finding the good in Yidden. That's the mitzvah. Kam chaviv in mitzvahs al Yisrael. Gavald. Every Jew gives me an opportunity to do a mitzvah. Meaning to make a bond, to make a connection between myself and Hashem, to open the shades a little bit, on reality, just a little bit more, and to reveal the goodness from within that person. What a privilege. What a privilege to be able to do that. Kama chaviv in mitzvahs. Al Yisrael. You can do a mitzvah with every Yid. Every Yid can serve as a potential conduit to the infinite being whose spark he or she carries within them. That's the consciousness of Rebbe Shimon. We call that Yoima de Rebbe Shimon, even though that means in his days. It means the chesed-oriented outlook of a person to whom the world was not opaque as it is to everybody else. There was no dam nida. Hashem was literally present in everything. And Hashem is good, and goodness is literally present in everything. Rebbe Shimon lived that way. The Arizal lived that way. The Baal Shem Tov lived that way. Rabbi Nachman lived that way. Hiskashrus to tzaddikim, we spoke about Achnasas Archim last week, right? Hanging around these kinds of tzaddikim is just, we'll read it, right? Just turn back a page. V'lavei lachesed, this was in Torah 28. Chavches, efshar lavei ayidei shayachnes tamid chacham tzaddikim l'seich beisai. In order to get to a chesed-oriented mindset, a person has to bring the tzaddikim b'seich beisai, not just reading their words, but to bring them into our heart. B'seich beisai, take it home. Mamish, take it home. And this takes work. This takes, again, at least as much work as the Indian of Pgam HaBris. At least. And requires at least as much focus, if not more, based on the understanding that Pgam HaBris of the actual Bris HaMa'ar is a symptom indicator of this worldview, so then I should probably be spending even more effort and energy on the Mayach so that I don't become an epileptic and that I'm not dumb, right? Living with dumb in my brain. Because that's where it all starts from. Mayach shalat al alev. How we think is how we feel is how we act. So you reverse engineer it. You go back to the thinking. And to really work on this. To notice ourselves slipping into negativity without judgment. It's not a matter of judging, I can't believe I'm doing this again. I can't. It's not that. It's just noticing it. And counteracting it. And it begins, by the way, with our own self-thoughts about ourselves. Because that's where it all starts. When we're negative on ourselves, or negative on other people, we're negative on the world. And to notice the critic, and to be mamtik it automatically in the brain, that's where it starts. That's where it starts. That's where the avodah is. To hear that, and then, so in other words, compassion towards self is first and foremost. When a person, and it's a muscle that you can, it's like reps, just like working out, right? A person has to do repetitions. There's no other way, right? You can't snap your finger and things should be, you need to train your brain. The brain can be trained. And so when there are repetitions of self-rectifying negative self-talk and counteracting it immediately, from the higher consciousness that actually has the tikkun Klalli as opposed to the Pgam Klalli. Again, I'm not speaking about the world now. I'm speaking about our inner world and ourselves. And we have the tikkun HaBris of saying, no, I have a covenant with God. I'm holy. I'm good. I'm trying. etc. Fill in the blank and say, I know that this is coming from the Amalek inside of me. This is called, they're having all symposiums about Amalek. None of that matters right now. This Amalek matters in me, not the Amalek. Who's Amalek? Leave that. That's not relevant right now. I know who Amalek is here, right? It's in me. It's the Amalek inside. It's the darkness and the negativity and the shutting Hashem away. It's this. And so we work on that, and repetition after repetition, bit by bit by bit by bit, we self-correct. And we bring ourselves back into the higher consciousness of love, higher consciousness of acceptance, higher consciousness of giving ourselves strength and chizuk. Then bit by bit, we're able to transform. All the while that we're not in that zone, don't say anything. Don't make any neder about yourself or about the world, because then you'll have to come Yom Kippur and have to do Kol Nidre, because it's not real. It's not real. Those statements are not real. Hashem should bless us to mamish, not just again learn it. Le'alimru ha'ikar. Allah HaMaisa, I think today's shiur is incredibly fundamental, foundational. I think there's a lot to think about and discuss and to work on. And Hashem should help us all work on these things to achieve the levels that are possible for those who are connected to this spiritual path. Thank you. L'chaim, l'chaim.
אני הבן ואתה האב שלי שכל כך אוהב אותי האב שלי מלך חי וקיים על כל נשימה שאני